The physiological resorptions of semen. Since the internal secretion of the testes has been shown to be formed by the same tissues which elaborate the external secretion, namely the seminiferous tubules, the question arises as to whether a resorption of the external secretion, and of its contained hormone, into the blood is possible, and whether there exists a physiological mechanism whereby this may be accomplished. Concerning the fact that the semen may be resorbed into the female bloodstream after coitus has been established by the experiments of Weldstein and Eckler, who found that, within 2.5 to 16 hours after coitus, the blood of the human female contains a ferment which peptimizes the albumin of testicular extract. If the semen can be absorbed through the walls of the vagina into the blood of the female, the question arises as to whether the semen may not be absorbed through the walls of the seminal vesicles into the blood of the male, if restrained. Many writers have indicated such a possibility, the majority being of the opinion that this resorption takes place mainly through the lymphatics lining the seminal vesicles. That semen can be directly absorbed into the blood when it's conserved has been definitely proven by Scheiger in the case of rams. Shattock and Seligman have made a special study of this question on the same animals. They found that the same secondary sexual characteristics appeared in sheep whether the seminal fluid was permitted to pass up into the seminal vesicles where it was resorbed into the bloodstream, or if the vas deferens is accorded by ligature, rendering the sheep sterile, but not impotent. Their investigation showed that a definite resorption of seminal fluid occurs in the seminal vesicles, and that this leads to certain nervous reactions. Spermatogenesis, these observers concluded, is the initial factor which determines the effects of the sex glands upon the body. This takes place through the resorption of the semen, which can occur directly without passing through the lymphatics of the seminal vesicles. Describing the mechanism of a similar resorption of semen, in man, Tissot writes, quote, "It, the semen, is secreted by the testicles, thence passing through a rather long canal, the epididymis and vas deferens, into the seminal vesicles, and is constantly taken up again by absorbent vessels and returned into the mass of circulating fluid." According to Hunter's opinion that absorption occurs only in the lymphatics, the genital organs will, according to this theory, be adapted to absorption, since vessels of this kind are here very numerous. The fact is demonstrated by sufficient proofs, one of which here will suffice. In a healthy man, the semen is constantly secreted in the testicles. It proceeds from thence into the receptacles, which are very limited, and which cannot contain what is secreted in one day. There are, however, some very continent men which have no emission of semen for whole years. What becomes of it if it be not returned to the circulation? Quote, "It is probable that this absorption does not take place solely in the seminal vesicles, but also in the testicles, in the epididymis, which is a kind of first receptacle adhering to them, through which the semen passes from these organs to the seminal vesicles. The semen is retained in the seminal vesicles until it's used, or expended by nocturnal emissions. During this time, the greater part is resorbed by the blood, and produces, on entering it, remarkable changes, the hairs in the beard. It alters the voice and the manners, for age does not produce these changes in animals, they are caused by the semen alone, for they never occur in eunuchs." Indicating the necessity for a resorption of semen, Dr. Bernard Talmy writes, quote, "Let us follow a young man going to a ball and dancing with a number of girls, all dressed in a way to awaken the erotic desire of any man. During the contraction, the testicles secrete spermatoza, which are stored away in the seminal vesicles. After the ball, the young man goes home to sleep. He has no pollutions that night, or the following night, or the following nights. Still, the desire has subsided. Where are now the spermatoza? The only answer is that they are resorbed, just as the semen is absorbed in the female organism." Unquote. Dr. Talmy argues that since the semen can be absorbed through the mucous walls of the vagina into the blood of the female, then it should also be able to be absorbed through the walls of the seminal vesicles, where it's retained. He writes, quote, We know that semen is absorbed in the female organism. Waldstein and Eckler have shown that the male sperm within the female body represents a foreign body in the sense of Abderhalden. The blood of a rabbit, 24 hours after copulation, possesses the quality of dialysation upon testicular tissues. Unquote. According to Professor Lidston, the improved nutrition of those who have been rejuvenated by Steinig's operation, as well as of individuals after being sterilised, which has been observed, is due to enforced conservation of semen. Dr. Guthrie writes, quote, "The operation above mentioned, either extirpating the vas deferens or separating the testicle from it, removed the testicles from the position in which their product could be voided in the usual manner through the urethra, but did not separate the testicles from lymphatic ducts, through which the resorption takes place, whether they be connected with the vas deferens and seminal vesicles or the peritoneum. The signs of virility depend on the lymphatic absorption of the spermatoza, not of the other liquid secretions of the vas deferens. Spermatoza, like blood or any other matter in a vessel without an opening, will be resorbed by the lymphatic ducts." Unquote. Concerning the necessity for the lymphatic absorption of seminal fluid from the seminal vesicles and vas deferens, Dr. Guthrie writes, quote, "It seems that we have reached a dilemma, either voluntary passage forward through the penis, but supposing there were a third way out, that is the process of resorption through the lymphatic vessels which are abundant in the walls of the seminal vesicles and the vas deferens. It is a strange fact that, although many authorities imply the existence of a resorption, they do not realize the formal existence of such a process. Guazet admits a resorption, and attributes to this the general manly physical and moral vigour, as it is the vivifying agent of young and adult individuals who have active testicles. On the contrary, loss of semen and consequent non-existence of the resorption entails loss of strength. The above consideration suggests that, in order to obtain the highest state of health, it's advisable to store up and preserve all the genital secretions. Therefore, it may be expected that the man who controls all loss of seminal fluid will heighten the tides of his vitality to the very maximum of which his organism is capable, up to the very limit of his possibilities." Guthrie, Regeneration. According to Dr. Guthrie, since the resorption of semen is a normal physiological process, for which a definite mechanism exists, the loss of semen interferes with this process and is a source of debility. He says, quote, "Those persons who are seeking the highest state of vitality possible to them, and who realize that all losses whatever, through whatever causes, must be avoided, there is for them a possibility of an ever-increasing vitality. They will insist on preserving every drop of their precious sperma, permitting it naturally to be resorbed, assuring them first of all of a perfect physical body, next of increased mental faculties, and finally, if they progress, and the higher nervous centres be nourished and developed, of the fullest spiritual development." Dishart again says, quote, "Galen knew that the fluids were enriched by the retained semen, although he was ignorant of the manner. All is full of it, said he, in those who have no sexual intercourse, and we find none in those who frequently indulge in it. He then attempts to discover how a small quantity of this fluid can give so much energy to the body, and finally concludes that it is by its exquisite virtue, and that it thus communicates its influence very promptly to all parts of the body." Unquote. The secretions formed by the seminiferous tubules of the testicles are conveyed by the vas deferens to the seminal vesicles. These are two membranous pouches situated at the base of the bladder, which has a triple function. 1. To act as reservoirs for the testicular fluid. 2. To add to this fluid glandular secretions of their own. And 3. To act as organs for the lymphatic absorption of the secretions of the testicles and vas deferens. The possibility of lymphatic absorption of semen is clearly indicated in the case of the female. Kohlberg observed a resorption of spermatoza into the blood of female rats shortly after coitus. Gynecologists now speak of a spermatotoxin developing in the blood of the human female as the result of excessive absorption of spermatoza by too frequent coitus. If such resorption is possible, It would clearly indicate that spermatozoa may be similarly resorbed through the mucous wall of the male genital tract, and may enter the blood. That such a resorption occurs in the male is proven by the fact that animals and human beings can live in complete continence, without either voluntary or involuntary emissions, for years at a time. Though during this period, a steady flow of testicular secretions may pass up the vas deferens to the seminal vesicles. There is no alternative, except lymphatic absorption through the walls of the seminal vesicles. Dr. Guthrie illustrates this point by citing the case of a male horse who, dragging a heavy load, had stalled before a hill. Excited by the presence of a mare, the horse feels its genital organs swell, stretch, on account of the production of testicular fluid, which soon spreads all over the organism. He neighs joyously, and descends the hill without noticing the load, which before was too heavy for him. The testicles, the vas deferens, and the seminal vesicles are thickly penetrated by absorptive lymphatics, which draw up the seminal secretion to the iliac and lumbar lymph nodes, thence passing to the receptaculum coeli, a large lymphatic receptacle in the abdomen, where the fluids gathered by the pelvic lymphatics are stored previous to being sent up, through the thoracic duct, into the left subclavian vein, just before its entrance into the heart. In this way, testicular secretions pass directly into the general circulation and are carried throughout the body, particularly to the nervous system. Professor Steineck has performed experiments which definitely proved that the secretions of the sex glands, after passing into the blood, are carried principally to the brain and spinal cord, within which they are stored. Steineck injected into a series of castrated frogs extracts of the brain and spinal cord from frogs in heat, and into a second series of castrated frogs, the brain and spinal cord of castrates were injected. In the first series, a good clasp reflex appeared, while in the second series, no changes were visible. Injections of other organs of frogs in heat were unable to evoke the clasp reflex in castrates. According to Professor Lipschutz, quote, "These experiments seem to show that there is an elective action of substance secreted by the testicle. These experiments seem to show that there is an elective action of substances secreted by the testicle upon the central nervous system." Unquote. The sperm conducted similar experiments on the basis of which he concluded that, quote, "The internal secretion of the testicle acts in a specific manner only on certain nervous centers from which impulses are sent to certain organs, and the metabolism of the latter is changed in a given direction." Unquote. That the internal secretion of the sex glands may have a nutritive function in relation to nervous tissue, and that mental diseases may result from its absence, is indicated by many observations. Obregia, Parn, and Urecia found degeneration of the seminiferous tubules and absence of spermatogenesis in dementia praecox, progressive mental deterioration. They believe the spermatozoa may have an internal physiological function and that dementia praecox may result from their absence. They attribute the degeneration of the seminiferous tubules to autointoxication, resulting from disturbed metabolic conditions. McCarrison remarks that atrophy of the testicles is frequently found in cerebral and spinal diseases. Forek, in his book on the testes, notes developmental defects in the reproductive system of idiots and cretins. That degenerative changes are to be found in the gonads in dementia praecox is well known. Todd found diminished weight of the testicles in 88% of 25 cases of dementia praecox studied. Many physicians also noted an improvement in dementia praecox after gland transplantation. Frequently, in operating upon women having dementia praecox and other psychoses, atrophied ovaries are found. Neurotic phenomena usually follow the removal of the ovaries. Mott and Sush, studying 27 oases of dementia praecox, many of whom were active masturbators, noted degenerative spermatozoa or none at all in their testicles. They report, in the great majority of cases of dementia praecox, an emulsion of the testes shows no spermatozoa. Matsumoto, in a study of 20 cases of dementia praecox, also found a cessation of spermatogenesis. The relationship between spermatozoa and cells of the cerebral cortex, which is marked as regards their chemical composition and elongated structure, is indicated by Norris, who says, quote, The resorption of what Dr. Lee Camus called a mass of microscopic brains is a source of vigor and longevity.